and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Chris Cooper, sitting in for Ann Northrup.
And we're taping on a very sad day, a very sad week, because we just learned before we taped, and we're taping on Tuesday evening this week, that Edie Windsor died. You knew Edie is the woman who won us the right to federal marriage rights, so we're certainly going to talk about her. And also this week we lost the bisexual Kate Millett, whose sexual politics defined the second wave of feminism.
And then adding to the sadness, another punch from the Trump administration, who continues its onslaught against us. I'll have some choice words for gay Republicans who assured us that Trump was our friend during the campaign.
But there is a bipartisan effort in the Senate to block Trump's ban on transgender service members.
The out-gay mayor of Seattle, under fire for relationships with underage men in his past, has resigned.
The Broadway composer Michael Friedman has died at 41 of AIDS-related complications.
And a study out of Stanford says that there is a machine that can tell from photos whether or not you're gay, at least if you're white. We'll talk about that controversial study.
The non-binding postal vote on same-sex marriage is underway in Australia, but we won't know the results until mid-November.
Transgender activists disrupt the opening day of the U.S. Conference on AIDS, trying to get better health care and more attention to their issues.
Republicans are mounting a last-ditch effort to gut the Affordable Care Act before a crucial deadline at the end of the month.
And if there's any time, Andy and I will preview the fall season in theater, film, and TV, and tell you what to watch out for. Okay.
Well, we start with Edie Windsor, and I just learned of this before we taped, and so I'm very sad because we worked closely with her, had her on the show. But there she is. That's the day. There she is with Kathy Marino Thomas, getting a kiss from Kathy. She's the one who brought suit when her marriage to Thea Spire was not recognized after Thea's death. So she had to pay all these taxes. So she said,
exactly.
Hey. So she brought a case that initially the gay establishment didn't embrace, but then it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and she won. And you can credit Edie Windsor for all the federal rights you have in marriage. It didn't win us all marriage rights. That was in the Obergefell decision when all the states had to do it. There's Edie with President Obama. Obama just put on Facebook that he said he spoke to her just a couple of days ago, and of course had the highest respect for her.
I did not know Edie Windsor personally, but I idolized her for what she did. I saw her at all the events because she was always at all of them. She loved to go to the gay pride marches. She was always in the parade and the float, usually as Grand Marshal at the head of the parade. When I went down to D.C. this year, she was down there in that parade. And so it was just, I saw her at different functions and got close to her, and that was enough for me to get all excited because she was such a bundle of energy, very diminutive woman, but just exuberant and determined, and I would say almost a brassy blonde in a good way.
Oh, yes.
And determined that nothing would stop her from enjoying her life and getting the rights that she was entitled to. And
we're going to show you a clip from the movie that was made about them years ago called Edie and Thea, her wife.
Her first wife.
A very long engagement. Yes, she's survived by her wife.
Her current wife.
Judith.
Judith Windsor.
Case in Windsor.
Yeah, they married in 2016.
Edie got the name Windsor because she'd been married to a man for 5 minutes, but she wanted to let him have a happy life, and she let it go. And she was with, the long engagement with Thea was like 40 years. Thea proposed marriage 40 years before they were able to get married.
And they didn't have engagement rings. Instead, she had like a diamond brooch she wore because, wearing a ring back then was too risky that someone would catch on.
She was a biggie at IBM, Edie. She was a very accomplished professional woman. But once Stonewall happened, they started to really come out and get involved in the movement. And they were at everything. They were real grassroots activists. If you get to see the whole film, Edie and Thea, Very Long Engagement, they went to everything. In order to get married, they took advantage of Brendan Fay's group called the Civil Marriage Trail, which brought people up to Canada when you couldn't get married in New York. You go up to Canada, you get married, which she did, while Thea was suffering from
multiple sclerosis.
Yes, very debilitating, and she died 2 years after that. So we're just to show you a little bit of Edie. We're very sad to see her go. A little bit from Edie and Thea, the documentary about them.
I grabbed her.
She didn't just grab me, she grabbed her in between.
I grabbed her head into my breast.
Yes, that's right.
And we made love all afternoon and went dancing at night. And that was the beginning. When was it? About 1962. I suddenly couldn't take it anymore, and I called an old friend of mine, a very good friend, and I said, if you know where the lesbians go, please take me. And somebody brought Thea over and introduced her, and we ended up dancing.
And we immediately just fit. Our bodies fit. Well, I mean, we've had 42 years.
Yeah.
And then when I had this bad prognosis, that essentially it was so bad, let me say it, that I had about another year to live, and that was it.
Having gotten the bad prognosis, she woke up the next morning and said to me, do you still want to get married? And I said, yes. She said, so do I.
As the years go by, that feeling of attraction stays the same. Each one of us, in fact, looks different from how we looked when we met. But if I look at Edie now, she looks exactly the same to me. Exactly the same. And she'll say the same thing the other way.
I, Thea Spire.
I, Thea Spire, choose you, Edie Windsor, to be my lawful wedded spouse, richer and procurer,
In sickness and in health.
in sickness and in health,
And until death do us part.
until death do us part.
So sorry to lose her. You know, when right before Thea died, she said at a rally, marriage is a magic word. She said it is magic throughout the world. It has to do with our dignity as human beings, to be who we are.
I have to add, Andy, you said how sad you were to see her go, and when I saw the news, I gasped, and I was sad, and then I smiled, because I realized, you know, she was 88, she lived this amazing life, and she leaves all of us this lasting legacy, and what a way to go.
Well,
I mean, that's the way to do it.
After she won the victory, it was 2013, and she said to me, oh, I'm going to do this for till May, and then I'm getting out of the picture. Because I've done what I had to do, and I want to have a life. And she did meet another woman, and Judith, and got married again. But she never stopped being involved in the movement. She just kept coming to all the events, and she was always greeted as the hero that she was.
So I think if there's two things that I take away from her life, number one is her statement that she apparently made all the time, let's try that again. Don't postpone joy. And the second is that if you think for a second that you can't make a difference as an individual and change the world and the way things are going, don't believe that you can't. You can. Edie did. So many of us can. There are all sorts of ways we can change things and make the world better.
And the same thing has to be said about Kate Millett. Kate Millett was a pioneer second-wave feminist. She wrote a book called Sexual Politics in 1969, and she died at the age of 82 in Paris on her annual trip that she would make, there on her birthday. And she's survived by her spouse, Sophie Kerr. But Sexual Politics was like the manifesto for the movement. It just changed everything. Andrea Dworkin said the world was asleep but Kate Millett woke it up. And, Kate herself said, in the book, many women do not recognize themselves as discriminated against. No better proof can be found of the totality of their conditioning, the way people are conditioned to accept second-class citizenship.
And I have to admit, I'm not probably a little bit too young to be as familiar as I should be with her work, but apparently what she did was she put a spotlight on the totality of male control, of all the levers of power, of all the aspects of society, and by doing that really changed the perception and really pushed feminism to another level.
In law, women were practically property in marriages. I mean, it took a long time to change that. People like Ruth Bader Ginsburg changed that. But Kate's manifesto in sexual politics really played a tremendous role in doing that. And of course, she came out as bisexual and really as a lover of women after she had been married to a man. And that really upset a lot of people in the women's movement, and she talks about all this. We're going to run a 5-minute clip from a documentary about her, if we can. It's going to tell you a lot about Kate Millett in old age and flashing back to her younger years.
Kate Millett lives in upstate New York and nowadays supports herself by farming Christmas trees. Having done a PhD in English literature in the late 60s, by the early 70s she was married and living as an artist in Manhattan.
When I was 5 years old, I kind of noticed that everybody was a guy, like George Washington and Jesus Christ and the Pope and all the rest of them. The presidents and so forth were all men.
As feminists, what we believe in is very simple, and that is the social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. Now, therefore, we are in politics, you see, because the relationship between the sexes is, in fact, a political relationship.
In 1970, you published Sexual Politics. When you were 34 then.
Yeah.
But you were very clear in that book that you were very critical of romantic love, against monogamous marriage. You call for an end to the family.
Let's face it, I mean, everybody has relatives and people who are gay or people who are living together and aren't married, and then somebody has a mistress on the side or a lover on the side. I mean, this has been going on for a million years. It isn't news to anybody.
When the book first came out, Kate, and you were hailed as a big star, weren't you?
Well, yes, always mistakenly. They called me the Mao Zedong of the women's movement. What an awful thing to be, the Mao Zedong. I mean, that guy killed 30 million people. I mean, gee whiz, thanks a lot.
You say there are no leaders in the women's movement, but wouldn't you acknowledge that you have been a leader and that has somehow changed your life?
Well, I'm an advocate, and I have a certain influence because I write, and that's all right. I think that's certain, validity and authenticity in that. I'm not the head of any organization. I don't make policy, and I don't tell anybody what to do. There's nobody behind me.
Wouldn't it be awful if we had a women's movement with generals, lieutenants, colonels, captains, and so on and so forth? If you've got that, if you've got a head, you can cut the head off, right? If they're all of us, there is no way to put us down or put us out of business. I saw this very clearly when they attempted, having put me and my face upon a balloon, Time magazine's cover and so forth. Then they said, oh my God, we just discovered she's a queer. So everything she wrote is nonsense and scrambled thinking.
But the feminists who attacked you at that time, they attacked you because at the time there was a notion that there were not supposed to be any leaders or any stars.
Oh, yeah. When people are oppressed, they get used to oppression. And one of them sticks their head up, they say, get your head down, shut up. So that went on for a while. And then I tried another transgression, it seems, because I said I'd slept with women. Well, that was a big sensation. If you say that in France, the next day everyone congratulates you on the street. But in America, they throw things at you.
You were subject to a sort of character assassination in the press because
Oh,
of
well.
homophobic character
Well,
assassination.
I've been assaulted by all sorts of things.
How do you feel about having sexual relationships with men?
Well, I was married to a man for 10 years and adored him.
I mean today, now.
No, I think it's women for me now, as a matter of fact.
That's one of the controversial positions you've taken, of course. And I don't mean to say
Well, it is indeed,
It certainly is.
Yeah. We're at the end of a period of masculine rule, quite harsh at times.
What's going to happen to men? They're going to become drones in this society?
Well, do you either have to run things or not?
Well,
I think
rather-
we're entering on a period where the sexes will be on an egalitarian footing, which they perhaps once were.
Aren't you doing some damage to the family when you move in that direction?
Well, if you posit a sort of patriarchal, authoritarian family, sure.
It sounds as though you had a huge amount of fame, but that after about 4 months, you'd been so attacked that it was very difficult for you, and then you got ill and you were kind of isolated and...
Well, yeah, I'm kind of isolated always, because if you're, a little bit ahead of the pack, it takes a while. Don't get too famous. Because, that's the worst thing, is getting too famous. Because then you're just a mark and everybody just shoots at you because you're a convenience.
Kate, did the women's movement drive you crazy?
Well, it drives everybody crazy. Revolution drives you crazy. You could get killed for it, too.
You can get killed for it. She was, Gloria Steinem said that she was brilliant, deep, and uncompromising. But she really just, is someone who made it happen for a lot of people. And we all owe her a debt of gratitude as well.
She had a very interesting statement talking about racism, but you can extend it to sexism, to homophobia. She said you can legislate about it, but as long as everybody is racist, you don't really do much about it. Unless you change persons and attitudes, you haven't changed much.
I think we've learned that through the Trump election and everything. That we passed a lot of laws.
Do we really have to switch over?
We're going to get into it. I think we ought to talk a little bit about Florida and the Caribbean first. Since we've gone through another hell of Weather Week. But there's no.
There's no climate change.
That's right. There's no such thing.
Irma
as
was a
climate
hoax
change.
perpetrated by the liberal media.
Yeah, but Rush Limbaugh got out of town in Florida. In the Caribbean, which was really the most devastated, there is specific disaster relief for the LGBT community that is being conducted by the Ruston Fund for Global Equality and the Caribbean Vulnerable Communities Coalition. And we will put this in our email that goes out every week. If you want to sign up for our email, go to our website at www.gayusatv.org, and you can sign up for weekly emails, and we give you links to things like this.
When Irma slammed into Florida, it destroyed 25% of the homes estimated in the Keys, but actually managed to leave largely Key West, the popular gay vacation spot, untouched.
Well, I've been there, and they really try to build hurricane-proof as much as possible homes. And that's the way they do it. But this was a devastating form. The LGBT community center in Cuba was destroyed. And then in Florida, in Orlando, the memorial around the Pulse nightclub was damaged. The fence had been down there. There were a whole bunch of volunteers who came out beforehand and shrouded the sign for the club in that canvas there, which you can see there. But the storm did blow down, didn't destroy the place. They're going to turn that site eventually into a museum and open the club elsewhere. That's their intention at this point. Okay.
So, the news from Washington. As you all know by now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that the Justice Department is weighing in on the side of the Colorado baker who refused to bake a cake for a gay couple's wedding. So basically, our federal government is saying that there is a license to discriminate against gay people if you have sincerely held religious beliefs.
Well, of course, the big argument they're trying to move away a bit, because the guy did make religious arguments in his case, the guy who owns the Masterpiece Bake Shop out there in Colorado, isn't it, right? they're trying to move away from that a little bit and say this is about expressive, compelling expression.
Oh, they're trying to shift the terms of the debate to freedom of expression and artistic value.
And our friend Art Leonard, the lawyer, the legal eagle, who we've had on the show many times, the gay legal eagle, says he's a little concerned about this because it's, they're just going after this whole business of compelling speech.
Okay, but. And I respect Art, and I think he's a smart guy, and I think he probably has a lot of merit on this. But you got to come back to the whole idea of let's substitute in interracial marriage for this. And will the justices, when they do that, feel comfortable giving basically the right to those with, the people with artistic expression saying, I don't want to use it for a wedding cake if it's going to be used in interracial marriage? Will they be comfortable giving that green light?
You could reduce any service to expressive conduct. When my waiter comes over to the table, he's very friendly, he wants to make us all happy. Suppose he doesn't like gay couples or interracial couples or black people.
He could claim that it's a performance,
he could
actually.
say, hey, I don't know, I'm not just putting plates and food on the table, I'm engaging in expressive conduct, and I don't want to serve these people. So I'm serious about this. If we lose this case, it will undermine all civil rights laws. I hope that the Supreme Court, as currently constituted, nobody dies, recognizes that. I hope that Anthony Kennedy will go along with this.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the points that those representing the state of Colorado are making is that there was no discussion about what the cake would actually look like or say. And therefore, how can you claim that this violated your artistic expression if there was no discussion whatsoever of what artistry you were supposed to perform on this cake?
I mean, I honestly think you could argue, if you are being asked to write a particular message on a cake, like, Hitler was great, or, a swastika or something like that. But if it's just a wedding cake, that you're working on a design for, but the argument of the baker is, I'm being forced to participate in this thing that I consider sinful, and you can't make me do that.
Well, the news here this week, because this case has been winding its way towards the Supreme Court for a while,
it's in the Supreme Court,
is that our federal government is now weighing down on the side of our opponents, and that's because we have a President Trump.
Yes.
So every Republican who was flapping his gums during the campaign saying, oh, Trump loves the gays, he won't hurt us, this is the result of having a Republican president, and in particular a President Trump and a Vice President Pence, calling the shots and putting people like Jeff Sessions in charge of the Justice Department.
Yes, I mean, and there are limits to the First Amendment. A guy who runs a restaurant can't put up an expressive sign that says, no blacks allowed, no Irish allowed, no whatever allowed. You can't do that. You're running a public business. You have to, you can't do things like that because that's what the anti-discrimination laws say. And 80, I think it's how many House members signed on to it?
86 members of the House of Representatives, all
Senate.
Republicans, have signed on on the same side as the Justice Department in favor of the Colorado baker, the Masterpiece Cake Shop.
And again, their argument is the government is prohibited from requiring individuals to make a particular statement with which they disagree. So
just taking some stock here, since taking office, President Trump has moved to kick transgender people out of the military. He's done the Department of Justice now coming on against us in this case. He's caused the Department of Education to rescind its accommodations for transgender students. These are just a few of the things that have happened. And the way to understand this, because, we've all seen Trump flounder in office, and he's been unable to get anything through Congress and get anything done that way. But where he is doing damage is not legislatively, but through the bureaucracy of the executive branch, who is having tremendous success dismantling things that Obama put in place, and in fact installing these religionists who are going to oppress us through the bureaucracy. And the other way he's managing to really set things back is through appointments to the courts. And that's what's happening down in Texas, where Trump has nominated Jeff Mateer and Matthew Kaczmarek. I'm sure I mangled that pronunciation, but they're involved with the First Liberty Institute, which is a Christian legal organization, advocacy organization that has fought against us on every issue you can imagine, from bathrooms.
So he wants
to
them on the federal bench for life.
He has a point. He wants them on the federal bench in Texas. And this is the other way that he's going to clobber us, is through federal appointments. God help us if he gets another Supreme Court appointment.
The headline on the story said that Trump is turning the courts into a place where civil rights go to die. Mm-hmm. If we don't have the protection of the courts, even if we pass good laws, good protection laws, or a federal gay rights law, the Supreme Court, if it becomes very right-wing, and the federal courts, they can say, oh, no, you can't do this. You have to respect people's, religious sensibilities and all this other kind of stuff.
Well, speaking of civil rights dying, is it time to talk about the Eric Diebold?
We can. Yes, that's the other one. Eric, we told you about Eric, what is his name?
Eric Diebold, I believe.
Diebold. He was at the EEOC under George W. Bush. And he had his he's been nominated to head the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. And yet, he is someone who fought against the Lilly Ledbetter Act, fair pay for women. He testified against it when they tried to codify it as law. And he said, you are going to create ruinous liability. You are not going to advance the public interest. So at his hearing, they said, we passed the law. Did any of that stuff happen? He said, no. He had to admit nothing. Then he tried to say, oh, but I defended a deaf guy who was a dishwasher at the EEOC. All right, good. Glad that you did that. He was trying to hold himself up. So Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, said, what if he were a gay guy? Would you have defended him? And he avoided answering the question, because they don't want to say that we're protected by the laws. So this guy's a disaster. And, I got a note from a gay viewer who said, I'm a gay man who thinks for myself. And, he said, all you tell is lies about Trump. And I asked you to write back. I said, please tell us whatever lies we're telling here, because we're going to keep telling the truth about what's going on. And it gets a little numbing. I mean, even Christy Whitman, who used to head the Environmental Protection Agency, wrote an op-ed piece in the Times saying what Scott Pruitt is doing is absolutely destroying the environment. And
well, it is. It can the Scott Pruitt appointment, the Eric Diebold appointment. All of it continues the pattern of putting foxes in charge of the henhouse.
Undermining the Dodd-Frank protections, which were weak to begin with, of our financial system, which were instituted after the financial meltdown of 2008, which was a disaster for the world economy. The Republicans in the Treasury Department under Trump are dismantling pieces of that, undermining it. And then the Department of Health and Human Services is spending your tax money with the money that's supposed to engage us around enrolling for Obamacare, which we still have, and using it to campaign against it.
If you take one thing away from the show, it's that the spirit of Edie Windsor and Kate Millett is desperately needed. Keep it alive and use it. Use it to channel your anger and get things done. You can make a difference even in the face of all this kind of onslaught.
And Lambda Legal is trying to, get the Supreme Court to hear the case of Jamaica Evans, which is an employment discrimination case.
We mentioned that last week, and now they're actually pushing for the Supreme Court to take it. They've made their move.
Because they want a nationwide ruling that affirms that sexual orientation discrimination violates Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which protects against sex discrimination.
Then actually, I think it might be Title 7.
You're right. Title 7. Title 9 is in another case.
Title 7.
Thank you for catching that, Chris.
Oh, there you go. It takes two.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on from that. Senators Gillibrand and Collins are...
No, we should say slowly. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, and Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine.
I'll get to that.
Okay.
They are actually fighting to attach an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that will block Trump's attempt to kick transgender people out of the military. Yeah. Now, it's great that Susan Collins of Maine, she's frequently on our side on issues, does these things, but the thing you always have to remind yourself is that when you're talking about legislatures, party affiliation matters. So you can have a good person Republican on our issues, but the fact that their label is Republican empowers the people who want to put us down by putting people like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan in charge of the legislature,
so
where they set the agenda.
You wanted to leave the party.
Or replace her with a Democrat who's just as good. But the point is, you can't just say, oh, well, this one likes us, so even though they're Republican, I'm going to pull the lever for them. Not when it's a legislature, because it makes a difference. Party affiliation matters in legislatures, and we've got to remember that. If we're going to play politics smarter, we've got to start paying attention to that.
She is one of 3 Republicans with Lisa Murkowski and John McCain who helped preserve the Affordable Care Act for the moment, because that's also up for grabs. We'll talk about that in AIDS News. But I wish the 3 of them or more of them would vote against some of these horrible judges who are going to make things miserable for us, well, for the rest of my life anyway. And then there's, this week, the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, who is an awful person, but she's rolling back the protections of the Obama administration for sexual assault victims in colleges. This is Title IX.
Yes.
Title IX guidance was used to do this. So the gay groups are certainly up in arms, especially as it affects transgender people and gay people in this area using Title IX. But there are also people who, including some lesbian feminists, who are writing and saying, well, the way the Obama administration did it doesn't really give due process to either side in a good way, and we need a better system for adjudicating these charges of sexual assault. Look, it's very hard, obviously, for women or men to report sexual assault. Most of them go unreported. It's a crime that doesn't get reported or solved, and if you do come forward and do it, you're going to go through the ringer. It's a horrible thing.
I may not know enough about this, but my gut reaction when I heard this was appalled, because from what I've read, women on campus who are sexually assaulted or raped do not have a lot of recourse. They get steamrolled, especially if it's like, and often it is, some star athlete in the program at the school and very important to their football program or whatever, and they don't get due process. And so I was really offended, particularly when Betsy DeVos said, oh, well, under the previous administration, Title IX had been weaponized. And I just found the usage of that terminology offensive, and I thought the idea of taking away tools to try to protect women on campus when there is such a rape culture problem on campus was a mistake. But I guess
everybody needs due process, though, and we always care about justice and fairness for everyone. So we need a better system, and I hope that all of us can work together to find one. All right. Okay, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, including the Human Rights Campaign, met with Senate Democrats about hate groups and violence, and they got the House Democrats to call on Speaker Paul Ryan to establish a select committee on the rise of white supremacy and domestic terrorism in light of Charlottesville. The
same conference has reached out to the Republican leadership, but has yet to hear back from them.
Apparently, Mike Pompeo, he's the new head of the CIA, is turning the agency into a white Christian hotbed. Prayer groups, very open references to this in all of his speeches.
He's a former GOP congressman from Kansas and self-professed evangelical and Trump appointee.
They want to hold Bible studies during duty hours, invite low-ranking individuals to their homes for Bible studies. I mean, what are you going to have, a crusade?
And, this is really sad, because my understanding is that up until now, CIA has been a very sort of professional, venerable agency, that tried to keep itself apart from such influences. But there you go.
Going to protect us. Disturbing news from Seattle, where the mayor there, Ed Murray, resigned on Tuesday, today, just hours after new allegations of him having sexually abused a cousin when the cousin was 13 and he was 21. He's a 62-year-old man now, but there had been like 4 previous allegations by when he was young, and he was going after underage young teens. So he denies all the allegations, but he says at this point, it's become ridiculous. It's a distraction. I'm going to leave for the sake of the city. And the new mayor is a city council member in Seattle named Bruce Harrell.
Meanwhile, in California, in Fresno, the school district is backpedaling after the board president made disparaging statements about the LGBT students and the approach of California towards LGBT students. It's so important for parents to teach these Judean-Christian philosophies was one of the quotes from this board president that they made to the Fresno Bee newspaper. So they had a school board meeting there where a lot of outraged parents showed up, and actually 2 of the board members attempted to apologize, and the board president tried to shut them down, and it was apparently rather raucous. But this is out in California.
Well, it's another example of trying to institute a theocracy, basically, in the country, and it's,
people are feeling emboldened on that.
I voted today. That's what my sticker says. I voted. We had a primary in New York. This country thrived on the separation of church and state. It really is what made it thrive. We didn't have religious wars like we're having now. And there's an anti-gay Republican representative named Tim Murphy, voted against everything we ever stood for, and he had to confess to having an extramarital affair with a personal friend, a woman, breaking up a marriage. It all came out in the divorce case of the woman with her husband. And, this is a guy who lords it over us, his morality, and there he is.
Does this go under the category of those darned heterosexuals?
Yes, it does. And back to the gay community, we just went through the anniversary of 9/11, and there's look, I don't believe in any of this stuff, but there is a movement within the Catholic Church to make Michael Judge, the gay firefighting chaplain who died in 9/11, there he is, on 9/11, a friend of mine, and thousands of others. He was really friend to everybody, to make him a saint. So they're looking at usually they look for provable miracles worked in the name of St. Michael. But what they're really asking for now is just, what kind of contact did you have with him? What did he do for you? Because he really just was a wonderful guy, ran an AIDS ministry, among other things, and just was a wonderful, wonderful person. Okay.
Well, in more disturbing news, we have 2 gay bashings that occurred here in New York City.
Yeah.
One of them was
liberal New York City.
Yeah, well, the backlash is happening here too. And apparently one of them is a reality star in the UK. I don't know anything about this reality show that he's on, something called Towie.
The Only Way is Essex.
Yeah.
That's what it stands for.
Okay.
Anyway, tell us about it.
Well, anyway, his name is Vaz J. Morgan, and he was the victim of gay bashing by other British citizens.
Who recognized him from the show as the gay guy.
Yeah, so, apparently, happily, I don't think the injuries are particularly serious, but it's still unfortunate that it happened.
Well, the odd thing about him is he did come out in 2015 as gay, but he was I don't know how exactly it came out, but he was sort of apologizing and said that he still thought it was a bad thing.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, I hope he's grown since then, and I hope he recovers from his injuries. And then in Brooklyn, a 43-year-old man walking at 9 o'clock on Hancock Street near Marcy, where he lives in Bed-Stuy, was assaulted by a stranger shouting faggot at him, and the guy kept shouting anti-gay slurs, punched him in the face, gave him cuts to his nose, and required medical attention, and it is being investigated as a hate crime.
But again, fortunately, no serious injury, so we can at least be thankful for that. Shall we switch over to international? Are we ready for that yet, or do you have a few more?
Maybe I want to talk about the death of Michael Friedman, who was a Broadway composer. He was the composer behind Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. Do we have a picture of him, of Michael? Yeah, there he is. 41 years old, and you rarely hear this of someone so young at this point. Died of AIDS-related complications, and it's a huge blow to the theater community. He was involved in all kinds of things, including...
I read that he was the director of the Encores series, which I've actually gone to see some Encores production. I saw Little Shop of Horrors at Encores, which was wonderful, really fun.
He received an Obie Award for Sustained Achievement, many, many awards, a beloved figure in the theater community, Michael Friedman. Gone at 41, and then should we talk about this this artificial intelligence study?
Oh, right. Gosh, I almost forgot about that.
Well, this has stirred up a hornet's nest in the community.
Well, white people, you're in trouble, okay? Because they've got your picture, and they can look, they have this computer that into the artificial intelligence program that allows it to learn from the data set, and as it looks at enough pictures, it becomes able, supposedly with, I'm trying to remember the percentages.
81% of the time it can tell who's gay and straight, and 74% for women.
Now
white women, all white people.
Now this is based on photos from dating sites.
That's true, and they said they studied 35,000 facial images.
Now, to put this in perspective, this is a success rate that is about 20% better than a person does. That's
just like, the chess machine always wins, right? But the GLAAD is very upset about this. They said it isn't science, it's not news. It's a description of beauty standards on dating sites. Some of the groups are very upset. They say this is Nazi stuff. This could be used, if it's true, by a government that wanted to go after gay people, and just by looking at them, which they do anyway at this point. But so there's a lot of tumult about this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the study, so I can't vouch for how well done it is or if it's sound, but it's certainly causing a lot of stir, and I don't know. Black people are safe. We're okay.
And I want to talk about briefly two examples of the religious right in New York. New York is one of those cities we banned travel to North Carolina and Texas and all these places that do, well, not Texas yet, but North Carolina and other places that do anti-gay laws, right? But what about in New York? I mean, we have yeshivas here where Jewish groups that care about kids have been suing and saying they're not teaching these kids anything.
A little background, yeshivas are Jewish religious schools.
Right. And the city is supposed to oversee education, and they said they would investigate these schools. In 3 years, they've looked at 6 out of I
think 39.
And the mayor is afraid of them.
And so
because they're a voting bloc.
They not only only looked at 6 of them, but they didn't even do surprise visits. They let them know in advance that they were coming.
Right.
And you're right. It is because the Orthodox community votes as a bloc, which is very powerful. There is a mayoral election coming up, so Bill de Blasio, our mayor, doesn't want to rile them up. So. These are the factors and that's always been the case. No one wants to rile the Orthodox community because they vote as a bloc.
As does the fundamentalist Christian community in New York. And they have elected a couple of council members over the years, including Fernando Cabrera, a virulently anti-gay council member. And de Blasio was found to be on his literature as supporting him. So the Gay City News called, and at first they said, yeah, we did. And then they realized what they were getting into, and they said, no, we're taking it, it's off, we're off, we're not doing it. But come on, we don't want to support these people, and yet, all right, let's go to international news.
The point is vigilance.
Yes.
Okay, so Australia is the big lead on international news because the word came down that the referendum, the mail-in, non-binding referendum...
Postal vote.
Exactly, had been cleared by their Supreme Court to move forward. So as soon as that happened, the ballots started going out. We're taping on Tuesday. The ballots started going out today, or probably in Australian time, yesterday. And once it got the okay, the gay groups had to move into high gear because we have nothing but things to lose with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a disgrace that this thing is happening. Our rights should never be voted on, and they don't have to be voted. In Ireland, they had to have a referendum because you can't change the Constitution without a referendum, and they did, and we won, and that was great. But this is a non-binding vote, so the Parliament's going to do what it wants to do anyway, no matter what the vote is. Now, the Prime Minister is a conservative. He says he's voting yes on the referendum, as is the leader of the opposition.
But he's the very same person who is insisting on this referendum instead of just having Parliament decide. And as I understand it, one of the reasons is because he's in coalition with the conservative group.
Thousands of people have been rallying all over the country for this. I imagine the opposition is going to get in gear, too, and do some rallies. The polling, it's as high as 70% in favor, but then they say it's slipping to under 60%.
And we've seen this here in the States.
We're not sure who's going to vote.
We've seen this in the States when the states were voting on same-sex marriage, and the polls said one thing, and then the actual voting occurs, and the results were surprisingly different. So there's going to be a lot, I think, of whiplash and seesawing here.
And we're not going to know the result until November 15th. Or in the United States, November 14th, right? I mean, we'll know before.
And it's funny, I was chatting with a friend of mine in Sydney, and he pointed out that in 2004, the then Prime Minister, John Howard, changed the Marriage Act to say that it was between a man and a woman through Parliament. But now the government is saying, oh, no, we can't change anything through Parliament. We have to have a referendum. So, you know, it's a little bit of
That's
double
not true. I mean, they're just shirking their responsibilities.
Exactly.
They should have voted. Why are you putting us through this? Do you hate us that much? Really? All right. Hate crimes against LGBTQ people in the United Kingdom are on the rise. Well, a lot of that's been happening since Brexit. The group Stonewall found that 21% of our people have been victims of hate crime, up from 9% who experienced a homophobic attack in 2012.
The bad news continues to roll out of Indonesia, and this time outside of Aceh province, which is the one province which is under Sharia law. So yeah, they hate us there. But now in a western province of West Java, a group of 12 women who were living together in a house were evicted because they did not look feminine enough, and people were growing suspicious of their activities. So they were evicted summarily. And
they didn't use artificial intelligence to figure it out.
Exactly.
A couple of more things from the United Kingdom. Jersey, which is a UK Crown dependency, the chief minister there said, I'm sorry we're not going to do equal marriage right away. It's a lot more complicated. It's pretty easy to do the gay stuff, but we have to change the whole marriage law, and it's going to take a long time. So we'll do it, but it's going to take a while.
Meanwhile, the Faroe Islands did hold their first same-sex marriage. A couple from the Faroe Islands are, I think, a Danish controlled territory, and a British couple went there just for the beauty of the place, decided to get married there, and it turns out it was the first same-sex marriage in the Faroe Islands.
I want to talk about some good Christians and some bad Christians in the United Kingdom.
Speak.
Well, there's a school there run by the Anglican Church, just a school for kids, and they embrace their transgender students, but a British family is suing and saying that because boys were allowed to come to class in dresses, this is an abuse of their child, having to witness this, and they are suing the school. They said we should have compassion towards gender dysphoria, but it doesn't belong in a primary school environment.
And what's the other British news that you have?
Well, there's a guy who's up for replacing Theresa May for the leadership, who's a very right-wing anti-gay character, and he's the leading candidate in the polls among conservatives. His name is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
All right. Well,
and he also opposes abortion in all circumstances.
More unfortunate news from Asia, specifically the Indian subcontinent. It looked like for a while there, and we may have even talked about it last week, that India was going to revisit its Supreme Court ruling that took gay rights off the table. But now that revisiting seems to have somehow disappeared off their docket as mysteriously as it seemed to have appeared.
What is going on?
No one's quite sure. People are sort of clinging to the slender hope that the fact that it mysteriously appeared in the first place
They
is
made
a
a wonderful decision that seemed to tee up, gay rights.
Recognizing privacy rights. So we'll see what happens. And also in Samoa, or rather in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is following what we talked about last week in Samoa. They won't be legalizing same-sex marriage, or for that matter, abortion, anytime soon. So says their prime minister and their minister for tourism and Christian affairs.
But thank you to Canada, because they've granted asylum to 31 gay and bisexual Chechens. Our country is not doing this, but they've done that. Well,
while you're talking about Chechens, supposedly our Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson from Exxon, wrote to the Russian foreign minister finally, chiding him or complaining about the treatment of gay Chechens. So supposedly after a lot of pressure, some action has been taken. But no, our borders are not open to Chechen refugees like they are in Canada.
And the California legislature condemned the violence there. The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, who's an out gay man, was asked by Maureen Dowd, and she wrote a column about him in the New York Times, you're going to go to Mike Pence's St. Patrick's Day party, and when you go there in March, he said, yeah. He said, you're going to bring up anything about the gays? He's not very nice to the gays. And he said he will go and he will bring that up. I will.
Good for him.
We eagerly await. Maybe we'll have you on the show and you can tell us about it afterwards.
Meanwhile, in Chile, a gender identity bill has cleared their Senate and has started its way through the Chamber of Deputies there.
And the guy who was appointed as the UN's first ever LGBT and intersex rights watchdog, he resigned. Why? Health issues. But it sounds like an illness in the family that he has to take care of.
Well, in Nigeria, there's been mass arrests of gay men, and we put that in quotes because a lot of times these men are accused of being gay simply for political expediency. The men were arrested by the Hizbah Corps, an Islamic security force that enforces Sharia law. And the thing you have to understand about Nigeria is that it's kind of bifurcated. The north is sort of under Sharia law and is largely Islamic, and the south is mostly Christian. But anyway, you slice it.
It's the opposite here.
Well, very good. No, but anyway you slice it, homosexuality is not particularly popular in Nigeria.
Nay. All right, AIDS news?
Sure.
Well, the U.S. conference on AIDS got underway, and the big first plenary session was disrupted by transgender activists. And basically what they're saying is, you know, the whole public health system ignores us, erases us. Certainly the people in the room were sympathetic to they went on for 17 minutes.
Right, they invited them up onto the stage.
They did.
Yeah.
And so they made their case. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie said that the 60,000 people who've died in the opioid crisis is much greater than the AIDS epidemic in terms of numbers. He said this on the radio. And there is this whole new business of trying to repeal the ACA before the end of the month using a reconciliation as opposed to having a bill. And I'm worried about it. I'm worried what they're going to take out of it.
This is being spearheaded by rumored closet case Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
And Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Okay. And the AIDS profiteer Martin Shkreli is being investigated. He's on bail.
This is the pharma bro, quote unquote.
Yes. But he threatened Hillary Clinton by saying, "I want my followers to go get a locket of her hair." And he's under investigation. He may be put into prison for having violated the terms of his, not parole, but of his bail while he's out on appeal.
That guy is professionally appalling. But
entertainment news?
Entertainment news.
Beach Rats.
I saw Beach Rats. We were talking about it last week and the controversy surrounding it. It's a good film.
Okay.
Very artsy. I like a film with maybe a little bit more plot impetus, but it's absorbing.
What's it about?
It's about these four, or principally one guy, amongst a group of four friends.
South Brooklyn.
And they hang out in Coney Island a lot, and they're young guys, unemployed, hanging out a lot, doing drugs, whatever, and pickpocketing and little petty thievery things to get by. But one of them secretly is gay and is starting to explore that online. A really good-looking kid too. They cast him with an
English kid, by the way.
Is he English?
Yes. People don't. You can't even tell from the accent.
That drives me nuts. I can't stand that.
Taking our roles.
Yeah, well, I'm serious. I mean, is there a shortage of American actors in the world that we have to constantly give our roles to the Brits?
All right.
Anyway,
all right.
Okay, I'll come down. Anyway, but what really surprised me was why doesn't the writer-director just fess up to using the actual events as an inspiration?
She ripped it from the headlines of the Michael Sandy murder, but she doesn't deal with it as a murder of this African American gay guy who was killed by these guys.
And I have to say that I was somewhat disturbed by the fact that they whitewash it. The victim is not African American in the film; he's white. So, why make that choice? Why?
And the weird thing is that she just won't acknowledge that she was totally influenced.
That's the main thing.
She shot it in some of the places where the actual incident happened.
Yeah. So, good film, but still surrounded by that controversy.
Okay. And the other controversy, there's a new movie coming out called Call Me by Your Name, based on a very popular novel. And this movie's already gotten great reviews, starring Armie Hammer.
It'll be coming out in November, I believe.
Armie Hammer plays a guy assisting this kid, as Armie Hammer on the right, assisting this kid's father in Italy on a project, and there's a romance thing here. Now, apparently, the kid is 17, and Armie is supposed to be somebody who's 24. So James Woods, very famous for playing Roy Cohn and a Hollywood right-winger, tweets that, what did he say?
He retweeted a conservative's outrage at this relationship, which alluded to NAMBLA.
This is quietly chipping away at the last barriers of decency, and he put named NAMBLA, the National what is it? The North American Man-Boy Love Association.
So James Woods retweets this. A little background on James Woods. He dated someone named Ashley Madison. I thought that was just a website. But he dated someone named Ashley Madison when he was 59 and she was 19.
Which Armie Hammer pointed out in a tweet, slam dunking him on that, for God's sakes.
And then he went on, when he was 66, he dated someone, Kristen Bogus, who was 20.
Yes.
So,
and Amber Tamblyn tweeted that James Woods tried to pick me and my friend up at a restaurant when we were 16 in Las Vegas. So what the hell are you doing, James? And you know, the other thing is, look, I mean that would be, you know, he denies this, but I mean, when you're 60 and you're dating 19-year-olds, what are you picking on this thing? And I don't think anybody should pick on age differences as long as the people are of age. I went through some crap when I was in my 30s and I dated some guys in their 20s, and people would insult me to my face about it.
Really?
Yes. I mean, people thought, oh, you know, they would make jokes about it. I said, this is a relationship I'm having. It's none of your goddamn business, you know. So, but people feel free to do that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, let's do a quick preview. Roundup, first of all, if you're going to be in New York, this is a good season to do it because you'll see lots of gay revivals. There is
Wait a minute, you talking about theater? Or
yeah, well, theater first.
We're going to do theater. All right, we're doing the fall preview season in our last 3 minutes.
And we've got 2 minutes.
Okay.
All right, so Nathan Lane and Andrew Garfield are going to star in a revival production of Tony Kushner's multi-award-winning landmark gay play Angels in America.
Yeah, and that is going to be at the Neil Simon, and that's going to be a hot ticket. It was a total hit in London.
There are also revivals of The Boys in the Band coming, and
the Boys in the Band,
Torch Song Trilogy.
Yeah,
sorry,
Torch Song Trilogy with Michael Urie. Howard Crabtree's When Pigs Fly on October 6th. M. Butterfly by David Henry Wang with Clive Owen and Jin Ha at the Court, October 7th. Revival of Charles Ludlam's Conquest of the Universe, or When Queens Fly at La Mama in November.
Gay, 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 gay.
Edward Albee's Three Tall Women, because he's gay and he's a character in this, with Glenda Jackson, Laurie Metcalf, and Allison Pill.
Oh,
what
I like
a
that.
cast.
I like that.
Christopher Durang has a new play opening up in New Jersey at the McCarter. He's a gay playwright. In Chicago, something called Charm about Miss Gloria Allen, a black trans woman who taught an etiquette class at an LGBT center in September 18th to October 8th.
All right, we still got to do TV and movies.
Okay.
All right, so TV. Will and Grace returns for its revival on September 28th on NBC. Dynasty is back in a new form. A little twist on it anyway, but that'll be returning on October 11th on the CW. Queers on BBC America starts October 14th with Ben Whishaw.
Right.
And Alan Cumming. They're among the stars in this series of short films.
Yes.
Walking Dead, which has several gay characters, is returning on October 22nd. And I guess that's the main ones. I'm going to skip the Marvel shows, even though I'm a comic book addict.
Okay.
And then movies.
Movies. Well, Battle of the Sexes about Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, which plays on the lesbian theme with her, Emma Stone and Steve Carell in it, September 22nd.
Documentary Gaga 5'2" for all you little monsters out there, and then a movie Heartstone, which is set in Iceland in the summer, about a teenage boy who falls in love.
Death and Life of the Marsha P. Johnson documentary. We'll talk more about this next week. We have plenty of time to catch up on it, but there is a ton of gay stuff coming up in the movies, in the theater, and on TV. Thank you for joining us here on Gay USA in our 33rd year.
And Anne will be back next week, well-rested and golfed.
And thank you for being with us, Chris Cooper.
My pleasure, as always.